Greetings, brave adventurers! My name is FoxyBard, and I've come to you with some more tales from my subreddit. It's over at reddit.com/r/FoxyBard. It turns out it's right what it says on the tin. You can also find a link to it down in the video description if you want to go share your own stories, or fan art, or whatever else. But in today's story, we have a very sad, gradual decline of a DM just being worn down by a group and by a specific player until they almost want to quit entirely. It does have a happy ending, but it's gonna be a trip to get there, so grab yourself a seat around the fire as we dig into this tale of role-playing. Our story comes to us from the user Mighty Bulwark and is entitled Tales of a DM That Slowly Lost Their Groove. Ow, you threw off my groove. I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove. I'm sorry I had to do that. Anyway, tale start. Inspired by the various tales from Crispy, Crab, Drake, and Foxy, I wanted to tell some tales from the campaign I DM'd that soon turned into a chore at best and the primary reason I nearly abandoned tabletop RPGs at worst, hoping to find at least a safe environment. There will be a TLDR at the very end. The main characters of this tale are me as the DM, Tyler as the human warlock, Mick as the draconic sorcerer, and Stella as the kobold ranger. Others may be added in a possible second part, but right now I'm talking about a specific incident, so that will be for the future. We started a 5e campaign after my many years of game mastering other games altogether. I was more of a Pathfinder and World of Darkness person before, but after a couple of very fun games, I decided to try my hand at this edition, and I found out I quite enjoy it. Okay, before you guys say anything, I start everything with a Session 0 in which I talk about the game, the setting, and, most importantly, that I wanted to play an old-school campaign. Dungeon crawling, exploration, combat, and obviously some social challenges and puzzles in a fair balance. Which, that just sounds like a campaign to me, but, you know. Despite some reservations from other players, they're on board and we start playing. The first few games are great. I find myself that I enjoy old-school D&D, and I craft a tale of the characters having to explore the ruins of an ancient city in the underground to find a lost temple in the wilderness, and having to compete with greedy explorers that want it for themselves. This is where things get rough. Maybe I went overboard with explorations and side quests, but the players soon got overwhelmed, even lamenting that there are too many dungeons in a game called Dungeons and Dragons, and this breaks my heart a bit. I loved designing dungeons and populating them with interesting NPCs and puzzles and lore, not to mention that the players were constantly bickering about which side quests to do, which faction to choose from, and generally being given directions, but not knowing how to follow them. Now that's actually kind of a common problem. Players are very bad at doing what you think they're gonna do. No plan survives first contact with the players. Then Tyler starts talking. Tyler had a specific idea of what D&D was and was constantly reminding me that we didn't agree in what it was. There were such gems as, "Cannot wait to see when the real campaign starts," or, "I remembered fantasy differently." But when confronted on the issue, would always say that he cared about the group and playing this campaign together in the right way. Gods know what that meant. Still, Tyler's commanding personality came out during a foray against a kobold tribe. Stella wanted to negotiate safe passage with them due to being a kobold themselves, and with a few good rolls, they did. All in all, a good sesh. Tyler, meanwhile, is silently seething, and when asked what's wrong, says it was nothing. And then, after the game, they proceed to write on the Discord at least 10 pages of complaints and a general review of my performance as a DM, how the party roleplays, and the general direction of the campaign. The gist of it could be summed up as,
They should have talked to me, since I'm always the party face, and I wasn't the center of attention.
10 pages of the most inane, self-centered crap I have ever heard. Tyler tears apart most of the party and my DMing, while also claiming he has to do it for
the good of the campaign.
This goes on for at least half an hour, and I go to sleep asking myself why he doesn't just leave, and I want to consult with the rest of the party about it. See you in the second part if you're interested, but spoiler alert, they still wanted Tyler. TLDR, player constantly needles the campaign and the setting and the other players, culminating in a self-centered rant and review of the party performances because they weren't the center of attention for the umpteenth time. Part 1 end, and we're gonna do parts 1 and 2 today, so I'm gonna save all my thoughts until the very, very end. Let's get on to the other one. Tale continue. Okay, same user, same story, just part 2, and this one comes with a content warning for discussions of surgery and of personal sexuality. Okay, let's go. Continuing from part 1, we left the DM, aka me, very despondent and angry. I had fun that night, but Tyler had to feel the main character. Main character syndrome. Woo woo wee woo wee. Okay, I'll stop. And made it everyone's problem. Bear in mind that I was getting really tired of Tyler's antics, and despite being on good terms with the rest of the group, I wanted him gone after that incident. Totally fair. I would too. That's ridiculous. It wasn't the first time that something like that happened, and I was downright tired of having to deal with D&D related drama almost every time. Tyler and another player, Lucas, one day were at each other's throat, and the other, they were best friends. Things got old pretty quickly since they were arguing so much over D&D of all things. Yeah, guys, it's D&D. Just have fun. One thing I discussed back and forth while asking for advice is that while he was in good terms with the group, I too was part of the group, and my issues were legitimate. I confronted Tyler about it, and not only was he unwilling to admit that he overstepped with that tantrum, if not out of respect for the other players' fun, but for the DM's peace of mind to just not have to deal with that again, but Tyler even tried to guilt trip me about it, shutting down every attempt of communication. Tyler did what Tyler wanted, and that's it, even having the gall to act offended for me pointing that out. The problem? The rest of the group was on board. Apparently, his concerns were legitimate, and they didn't behave properly, and they promised to do better next time as a group. You can't see it, but I'm doing like finger quotes with all of those. Bear in mind that Tyler ranted for 10 pages about their role-playing performances. It was like he kowtowed them into submission. I had to swallow this. The group had to stay together. It was their will, after all. Nah, put your foot down, you're in charge. I know that it can be really hard, but if you don't want to run the game, then they don't have a game to play in. It's as simple as that. You can probably guess that it wasn't the healthiest of situations. I felt more and more like an alien in that group. I just wish I'd been stronger. Yeah, like I said, it's hard. I understand. I wanted to quit. As much as I cared for the game, mostly as a flimsy excuse to hang out, because at the time, we were a tight-knit group of friends. I hated it now. The list of complaints about the game was getting bigger by the day. More challenging encounters, but they wanted less encounters per day. More NPCs, but they can't keep track of the ones they do have. We need more lore, but cut the dungeon crawling. It got so bad that the weekly appointment became a chore. I once faked to have stomach cramps to get out of it, and then I got them for real because of the stress. Yeah, it's not healthy. Yeah. That's when we go to the second incident that was a prelude for greater heartbreak. Tyler was playing a warlock, and like most of the charisma-based characters, was a bit of a flirt. Hey, I resemble that remark, fair enough. That wasn't the issue. He had a cute back and forth with an NPC that I liked, It was a fun diversion between one adventure and the other. It led to a tasteful fade to black when the NPC came knocking at his door late at night. Don't ever give in to these kinds of players, don't do it, it's not worth it, oh no. It should have been the end of it, but then I found out that Tyler was massively disappointed by that, and complained both in private, with Lucas mostly, and in public with his usual constant needling. Apparently, he wanted something more before the fade to black. He wanted a whole scene to roleplay before. He wanted some atmosphere. He wanted foreplay in a group setting with 4 other players sitting there watching you. Yeah, no. Not only was I massively creeped out, because by then I was very reluctant to actually roleplay that with Tyler, of all people, who I started to dislike more and more, but the fact that he had the nerve to do that behind my back, when I constantly asked for feedback and was very nervous about my performance as a DM, hurt me. I wanted this to work, and despite telling me that I wasn't the only one that had to make it work since we were a group, surprise, surprise, I was the one that had the most pressure on. Okay, to be fair, as the DM, you naturally have the most pressure on you, but it's unreasonable for him to just drop everything on you like this. Every day, I felt them breathing on my neck, and the game had to be perfect, and we had to play the best game ever. Because I am a good DM, they're just making suggestions. Needless to say, the game wasn't as relaxing as it was before. Also, another parenthesis, back then I was deeply upset by sexuality in general, and I was figuring out my sexuality and gender identity. It's not a struggle I shared with the rest of the group, of course, not even with the ones I was actually friends with. That fade to black was the best I could muster, so I felt massively disappointed and upset and just wrong when he said he wanted more from that. Listen, as someone who is on the asexual spectrum myself, I get insanely creeped out when people want more than a fade to black in games. Always do that. It's polite and it's... Not to mention my situation at home. My mother had to have surgery, and I was worried sick. It wasn't a life-threatening surgery, but the consequences would have been dire if she didn't do it. My DMing was a little subpar those days because of that, so back then I really just wanted to have one evening in which to relax and think about slaying kobolds and just unwind. Even that was taken from me. See you in part 3, where the DM learns from Lucas that the talking behind their back started way earlier than they thought, and the other players were onto it. TLDR, party turns demanding. Problem player laments behind the DM's back that a fade to black came too early for his tastes. Talks about it with the other players behind the DM's back, despite always asking for feedback. And tail end. And that is where we're going to end for this week. We'll get to the other 2 parts next week. It will be finished next week. I'm not going to drag this out. So, what do we all think of Tyler? I hate him. Like, before it was kind of understandable. He was airing grievances, and I think we've all had that feeling once or twice before, where a game or a system or something isn't turning out how you hoped it would, and you're not having the kind of fun you imagined. But, geez, 10 pages? That's a bit much. And then by the second part, when he's demanding that the DM basically... yeah. No. That is when he completely went off the deep end in my book. It was bad before, and that would have been grounds to get rid of him. It's completely unacceptable now. Things get, if you'd believe it, kind of worse from here, and, sad. I get sad from here. Hey, OP, if you do ever want to talk about, gender nonsense and sexuality nonsense, like, the Discord server is actually really good about a lot of that. We're very, very queer there. It is a very safe space. You can talk to people and try and figure things out better if you're still struggling. If you've got it all figured out, awesome. Love that for you. But we'll have to see how this all ends next week. See you then. Alright, but that's it for Foxy. So don't forget to like and subscribe, do all the YouTube things, you know what they are. We're shortening the outro because it's too long. Huge shout out and thank you to all of my patrons over on patreon.com/FoxyBard. They help me keep doing this and keep producing videos that y'all seem to love. Their names are scrolling by the screen right now. If you want to add your name to that list, head on over to patreon.com/FoxyBard and sign up for as little as $3 a month. But that's the end of the video. You can go home now. Or I guess you can stay here, but it'll probably just keep auto-playing some of my other videos. I'd love that, actually. Go and watch some of my other videos. It'll be a great time. Anyway, until then, let's douse the fire and get back to our own adventures.